There are other methods of documenting business processes than business process modeling. One of the most common ones you will run into is flowcharting. There are plenty of flowcharts still out there, even though the move is on to BPM. And as a matter of fact, you might be called on to convert some of your clients' business process documentation from flowcharts to business process models. So that might be something for you to keep an eye out for as a possible area of specialization if you are good at breaking down business processes and identifying how they work. So as with business process modeling, the BPMN that we covered, flowcharting has a set of symbols that it uses. However, you're going to find a lot of similarities when you look at a flowchart and when you look at a BPM. The flow still moves based on the flow of the arrows. You document the steps that take place in the process, so a lot of similarities. Let's go over some of the symbols you would find in flowcharts. One is a document. And you might see, especially on document flowcharts that really focus on the flow of paper-based information, especially in older types of business processes or paper-based processes, multiple documents, and you'll number each one of these and then follow each one as it goes around through the business process, maybe to different areas of the organization or even sent out to other parties. So document is one. The line and arrow is going to tell us which way the flow of the process is, and you might even see things like a little hand truck to indicate flow of physical goods. You would frequently find this in, say, a receiving workflow. Others you might see on a flowchart are a manual file. So that's an upside down triangle. So that's a document file. And we might even indicate how that is filed. So alphabetically, numeric, say by customer ID, or chronologically by date. In a flowchart, a rectangle with the actual squared off corners will be a process. And in a flowchart, you'll describe within the shape itself what each thing represents. So the document, what kind of document is it? Is it a purchase order? The process, what's taking place. There are also specialized shapes for processes. So you can actually distinguish between, say, a manual process or operation and those that are automated. Now, more recent flowcharts, you typically don't see that distinction made, and processes are just indicated by rectangles. You can also, especially since flowcharts can get pretty big, use connectors. On-page connectors, usually using letters A, B, and C. Allows you to clean up the diagram by eliminating some of the lines going all over the place, especially if they're going to have to cross, and then you would pick up with another A somewhere else in the diagram that picks that up. Now, you may also have connectors that go off page, and that is the off, I call that a home plate shape. So the off page connector will typically be numbered with labeled with a number, and sometimes even a number and a letter, especially if you have multiple connectors that go to the same off page. We can do a lot of the same things we do in a business process diagram, so annotations, just to provide additional clarification. There are multiple kinds of flowcharts. Document flowcharts are one, system flowcharts are another. System flowcharts frequently will have what we call terminators. And just like in a BPM, these are events that terminators are just going to be at the start and the end of the process. Also in system flowcharts, we can spend more time indicating, or we're actually starting to think about the computerized aspects. So this would be online storage. So a computer file or a computer database. Back in the days of CRTs, this was supposed to indicate sort of the television screen that we looked at. Of course, everybody's on flat panels now, so that shape doesn't make as much sense. But these shapes are all used in flowcharting. And there are many more that are available, but these are some of the common ones you would run across. Now, flowcharting, as we've mentioned before, has been around for quite some time, and it probably reached its heyday back in the mainframe days. When I actually started with Arthur Andersen, I was in the consulting division, I was issued an official IBM flowcharting template like this. And when it came to documenting business processes, we would use these, get a big giant piece of graph paper, and our manager would send us off and say, go document that process. So you can see here the shapes are there for you to trace, put on the sheet of graph paper, and then you would write real tiny to fill in what those shapes represented. So much like BPMs have gateways, flowcharts also use the diamond symbol, but in this case the diamond represents a decision. So how would we document just a basic process? Let's fill the bathtub. So we'll start using our terminator. And we will have a process turn on taps. Move down to the next process, check water level. And here we've got our decision or gateway. Is it full? If no, then we will wait and then go back into our process, check the water level again. Eventually, or maybe even the first time, we'll find that the water level is full, or the bath is full to the level we want. So we turn off the taps. And we end with another terminator. You can see why I have developed a preference for software tools to build flowcharts based on my drawing skills, but I think you get the picture. So let's take a look at flowcharting the process we talked about before, where we were going to make a payment at a convenience store. We use the gateway to split our path and then another gateway to bring it back together. Here we would be coming in, payment method, and we could say cash, process cash payment, card, process card payment, and then rather than having another gateway, we basically just bring both paths back together without a gateway, go to the next step, and continue on down. So the decision gives us the ability to split our business process into multiple paths, much like we would with a gateway. Also in flowcharts, you'll see a lot of times flowcharts run vertically, but we can still divide them into columns, showing the areas of responsibility, very similar to the swim lanes that you would see in the business process model. Now generally we don't create separate pools for external entities. They're just added as another column in the flowchart, frequently shown at one end or the other. So it would be the leftmost or the rightmost column for external entities. And then process maps, being a type of flowchart, are usually set horizontally, so they would use the swim lanes. So with flowcharting, we've got guidelines, the basic steps for documentation we've discussed previously still apply, but with us living in a Western society, a Western country, we generally want the flowchart to read left to right, top to bottom. Now it's important to remember that's a guideline. Arrows direct the flow. So there may be some situations where you need to break that rule. If you think of our bathtub example, we basically just looped back up and around. So, we broke the left to right, top to bottom, but that made things more readable than duplicating everything and then pulling it back together at the end. Columns or rows. Dividers to indicate responsibility areas. Typically a department or a function within the organization or an external entity. And you'll find this to a certain extent with BPM, but it's recent enough that it's still pretty standardized. But you'll find that flowcharting conventions differ across companies. Some are very structured and follow the original, the IBM notation and standards very closely. Others are a little more loosey-goosey about how they approach things from a flowcharting standpoint when it comes to documenting their system. Even within the same company, different people may use different conventions. And again, that's a result of flowcharting having been around for so long and used in so many different arenas and so many different specialty types of flowcharts that there are lots of different ways that people approach them. Each process should have some kind of input and some type of output. And again, best practice for flowcharts, keep them fairly high level. Use brief descriptions. With the understanding that more detail is available in the business process narrative. So that's flowcharting for you.